For the last episode of the series, we enlisted the help of a man who has seen it all, photographer Graham Watson, to help us look back on the highlights of the season.
He made lots of noise about wanting to win it, which you weren't sure whether he was being serious or not during the week before it, but he did try and win.
All our predictions have been shredded today, and they've been done by this man. Honestly, hits the peak, and he goes for it.
So many things happen, and always will happen. It's crazy, it's manic.
He's out of the saddle, and they're screaming at him on his radio, I'm sure, exactly what he has done and what he can do. He has to just keep on turning the pedals.
You need memorable days to make the sport, that much tougher, that much more attractive.
There's a crash. A couple taken out at the back. Oh, more have gone down. They're all over the place.
Falling off is part of the sport. If you fall off, you're not going to win.
He knows the lines, and he can take every single one of them, powers out of it, and says, see you guys, this is my party, and you're not invited.
That's the way it was in one of those years.
2014 has been a season like no other. From great champions to emerging stars, inCycle have been there every step of the way, bringing you the best of the action from the pro peloton.
At the end of the year, they ask you if you won or not, and I prefer to say yes.
Are you aware of the term mammal?
Mammal.
Mammals, but
yeah.
middle-aged men in lycra.
No, I'm not aware of the term.
There were the fans. And those who work behind the scenes.
Trying to potentially create just a happy family where everybody's happy and everybody's good and all the rest of it. And it's be a nice place to be, but you ain't going to win anything.
They have done a race, so try to help them recover a little bit better.
With the final Grand Tour, the Vuelta a España well underway, cycling photographer Graham Watson is on hand to talk us through what's happened in the season so far.
Not one person's dominated at all. The classics are all won by different people, whereas before one person's won 2 or 3 classics in the same period. There's just been so many different winners of so many different races. Even the sprinters haven't dominated each other. There's like 3 or 4 sprinters, maybe 5 sprinters, who have had a pretty good crack of 5 months race, and they've won a lot of stages. Not one sprinter's shone out beyond others.
Graham has enjoyed a 35-year-long career in the sport, which started when he won a photography competition in a British magazine in the late 1970s. He's since gone on to travel the globe via dark rooms, in-race motorbikes and countless media centres. Graham is on the road for around 170 days a year, but he wouldn't have it any other way.
It's a lifestyle like no other. If I was a generic sports photographer, it wouldn't be the same, because in cycling you're out there on the open road, you're not in a stadium, and every day, no matter which country you're in, you're seeing something you didn't see the day before.
Since the turn of the century, Graham has been shooting cycling at a plethora of destinations he'd previously never seen. From the arid tour of Oman to a gusty tour of Qatar, the season starts with a new breed of events. As a photographer who prides himself on setting the sport within a landscape, these locations offer an array of photo opportunities.
One of the most attractive things to me are the landscapes of cycling, more so than the actual racing itself. And somewhere between Australia and Qatar and Oman and Dubai as well, there's quite a few contrasts. There's a bit of everything. In Australia, very, very hot weather, but also in Qatar and Oman, perfect conditions for racing, and 23, 24 degrees maximum. Gorgeous training conditions, and for photography it's fantastic. Lovely light, in February light, very, very kind of warm light. It's not very contrasty, not too bleached out. It's a great way to start photographing the season.
The Dubai Tour in particular presented the first real glimpse of many of the peloton's big names, from Taylor Phinney to Mark Cavendish. With a largely flat course, it was an opportunity to gauge the form of the sprinters, namely the man who challenged Cavendish's monopoly in the sprint in 2013, Marcel Kittel.
I want to prove that I can do it again, what I did in 2013, be successful in the Tour de France, but also in general, together with the team.
And so it proved. Kittel won 3 of the 4 stages in Dubai, hinting early that 2013 was no fluke. He went on to clinch a further 8 victories later in the year, including 4, once again, at the Tour de France. A host of other big names played their cards at the Italian races. Alberto Contador showed his form at Tirreno Adriatico.
Alberto Contador. Don't bother about the time trial time today. You're looking at the winner of this 49th Tirreno Adriatico.
Katusha's Alexander Kristoff got the jump on the pre-race favourites to win his maiden Milan-San Remo.
Oh my goodness! Kevin Christoph! It is Christoph that's going to get this one! Christoph demolishes the field! Unbelievable stuff! How brave was that so late on?
And Movistar's Alejandro Valverde showed that he was back to his best at Roma Maxima.
Gilbert in the red and black. Can he possibly get back and bridge over to them? Oh, I think they've blown in this pair, have they? Valverde holds on. Oh, and he makes it!
It was one of many wins for the Spaniard in 2014 and signalled an upturn in form, as he suggested to inCycle earlier in the year.
I
believe that I've not returned to the level that I had before my suspension, but I've actually surpassed this and reached a higher level. I'm going into each race with a greater motivation.
Early April saw one of the most eagerly anticipated monuments of the cycling calendar, the Tour of Flanders. All eyes were on Tom Bonen and Fabian Cancellara.
Tour of Flanders is probably the hardest race to photograph as well as the hardest race to win, because people always compare it to Paris-Roubaix, which has cobblestones, but there's no hills in Paris-Roubaix. So that race favours is a very kind of one-dimensional race, a one-dimensional character to Paris-Roubaix. The Tour of Flanders is a lot more involved. It's tactical. You have to be able to climb these little, they call them bergs, these little hills, which rear up at like 20% sometimes. You have to race over cobblestones. There's so many more risks and dangers in riding Tour of Flanders.
In Flanders, it took me years. It took me years and years and years until I could reach the top. Because that's, in my opinion, it's the most difficult race somehow, because you have a race that lives for himself. You have cobbles climb without cobbles, small roads, different tactics, different ways the race can develop, and you have the weather, you have even the public, the people, the country that lives for that. That's all little details that in one race you will have.
As the reigning champion, Switzerland's Cancellara was the favourite, seeking a record-equalling 3rd victory at the Ronde van Vlaanderen. And Spartacus duly delivered, much to the enjoyment of his fan club.
You saw it today, it was fantastic. He lost the whole team, he was alone over there, and he fought it back, and the second time at Potterberg it was on the group, and at last this final rush, it was simply fantastic. Fabian is the best!
Fabian Cancellara is one of my personal favourites, and also a general favourite of all the photographers, because he's performed so well over the last 10 years. He's given us so many wonderful picture opportunities, and he came up with the goods. He won. The astonishing thing is he won in a sprint, because he won against Greg Van Avermaet and Sepp Van Mark, 2 very, very good sprinters racing on home soil. And to be honest, when we saw him in this group of races at the end of the race, I thought, well, he's not going to win this. And he won, and it was a fantastic result certainly for him, but also for anybody who remotely likes the guy. It was a fantastic result.
The following weekend, that rivalry would be renewed at Paris-Roubaix, but there are also other riders looking to upset the form book.
I would love to compete well in something like Paris-Roubaix. I've been up there before in the mix in that final sort of part of the race, but Paris-Roubaix is probably one of the few races like the Tour de France that just to finish that race and come onto the velodrome is quite something. So I'm looking forward to being able to do that.
He made lots of noise about wanting to win it, which you weren't sure whether he was being serious or not during the week before it, but he did try and win, and it could have been him going off the front in the last few kilometres, winning in Roubaix Stadium. It wasn't, it was Terpstra, because Terpstra had like 4 or 5 teammates kind of making sure nobody chased him down.
The quick-step tactics left many of the favourites red in the face, but the majority of the riders were simply left with mud on their face. As ever, the cobbled terrain saw many head to the hallowed Roubaix showers, while for many others, it saw them head for the deck.
Anything can go wrong and often does. The important thing for them is not to fall off in front of photographers. But there's enough photographers around on the course to capture almost every corner, every bend. And the chance, you have a very high chance if you're going to fall off, you're going to get your photograph taken.
Crashes would plague the principal races in April, starting with the Amstel Gold Race. Joaquim Rodriguez's season was disrupted by a second successive crash in the Ardennes Classic, while the likes of Zdeněk Štýbar, Andy Schleck and Geraint Thomas would suffer the same misfortune. But the main story of this year's Amstel Gold Race was the return of Philippe Gilbert. The Belgian had endured a difficult time in the rainbow jersey in 2013, managing just a single win. But he attacked off the front in Holland with a trademark aggressive move to claim the victory.
Firstly, Philippe Gilbert is one of the photographer's favourite cyclists because all he does is attack. He attacks, he attacks, he attacks. He's dynamic, he's good looking, he's got a fantastic body language which photographs very well. And so it was great to see him come back and win the Amstel Gold, the way he's won many other races before.
The final moments of Liège-Bastogne-Liège would provide Graham with a further photo opportunity. Leading into the final corner, Dan Martin crashed, allowing Simon Gerrans to swoop past for overall victory.
I think that Simon Gerrans would have got Dan Martin anyway. At the finish, of course, the Green Edge soigneurs are having an argument with a Garmin soigneur about who would have won. And the Green Edge guy said, no, Gerrans would have got him, he would have got him anyway. And the Garmin guy says, no, Dan Martin had that one, it was in the bag.
While the Garmin shop team were left deliberating what might have been, they were more relieved that Dan Martin sustained only minor injuries. Just over a week later, the Irishman was fit to line up in Belfast for the start of the Giro d'Italia.
Obviously with the crash last week at Liège, it wasn't ideal preparation, but yeah, we're in the best shape possible. I think the year as a whole has gone okay as far as preparing for the Giro, and yeah, I'm looking forward to 3 weeks racing.
Welcome back to our season review with cycling photographer Graham Watson. Dan Martin was looking to put his crash in Liège-Bastogne-Liège behind him and make a strong start at the Giro's Grande Partenza in Northern Ireland. But Martin's Giro lasted little more than 17 minutes.
Oh my goodness. 4 down, and that looks bad. It's Dan Martin.
This time Martin broke his collarbone in the crash and his Giro aspirations were over for another year. Garmin Shop's Director Sportif was in stoic mood following the stage.
It's obviously an extremely disappointing accident, even more so because it was Dan who was racing at home and was one of our favourites for the race. We came with 2 leaders, we've got 1 now, and it's just up to us to fight all the way to the end from now.
One man went on to dominate the opening week. Longest sprint star in the making, Australian Michael Matthews would win a stage and hold the Maglia Rosa for 6 days.
Fantastic for him, fantastic for the sport. The Australians always bring up new talent, and he's the best of the most recent batch of talent that's come out of Australia.
However, when the race hit the mountains, the GC hopefuls came to the fore, the first of which was Matthews' compatriot and 2011 Tour de France champion, Cadel Evans.
I'd say with experience, it's you may have less energy, but you know much better when to save it and when to expend it.
As it proved, the younger climbers surpassed Cadel as the race hit altitude.
We're seeing a whole generation of young riders moving up, not just Colombians, but there's the Italian Fabio Aru, there's the French guys who are moving up. Not some of them aren't so young, but they're definitely moving up. And the older generation is going to gradually move over this year, probably between now and the end of 2015. You'll see younger people winning these races. It's a pleasure to see.
Quintana did indeed move in at the Giro, making a decisive break on stage 16. However, the Colombians' attack on the Stelvio was seen as controversial, with some teams claiming they'd been told over race radio that the descent had been neutralised.
We never felt there was any official instructions for the race to be neutralised. It was more of a safety thing whereby the organisers just were saying to the cyclists, go slowly down the Stelvio, it's wet, it's slippery, it's cold, you're going to be freezing, you're going to be, you know, shivering all the way down, take it easy, and then we'll, you know, start the race properly at the bottom. But that wasn't really an official instruction. And luckily for the race, I think, some cyclists just ignored it.
Quintana moved into the pink jersey, displacing his countryman Rigoberto Urán, who'd held the lead for 4 days.
Everybody said he was going to win the Giro, he was going to do it. Personally, I needed to be, you know, I need to see the proof, because we've had so many Colombians who've come into the sport going back almost to when I began.
Colombian climbers do have a history, but I'm not sure whether people believe in me because of that. The fact is, I've shown what I can do in the past. I'm strong in the mountains. The route suits me, so they have me as a favourite.
Quintana's class came to the fore, and the tiny Colombian romped to victory in the penultimate day's individual time trial to secure his first Grand Tour win. Little more than a week later, many of the riders seeking victory at the second Grand Tour of the year, the Tour de France, went to the Dauphiné to gauge the shape they were in.
I think probably the most standout feature of this year's Dauphiné was Chris Froome's form. People blew up. He did have a crash, but he should have overcome the crash. And on the penultimate stage, stage 6, I was taking a picture of him with a long lens. Whether the crash he'd had a few days earlier affected him, I don't know, but he looked quite lacking in stamina and endurance. He looked actually quite weak, and his eyes just stared back at you through the lens. And you realise this guy was not the Chris Froome of 2013.
25-year-old American Andrew Talansky would spring a surprise and clinch overall victory. As a cycling photographer, Graham has to be prepared for all eventualities.
I think one of the skills of a cycling photographer is to read the race. You have to always anticipate what's going to happen. And you don't get it right every day of the week, but you have to anticipate everything that's coming along. You have to know what's going to happen, whether to be ahead for a scenery shot. You have to know if a cyclist is looking weak. Sometimes as a photographer, you get very close to them physically in a race, and you can actually sense you can feel their body language, their shoulders rocking a little bit.
Elsewhere, the other Tour hopefuls were putting their final touches to preparations in Switzerland. The world time trial champion Tony Martin held the race lead for 8 stages before Rui Costa came to the fore, registering his first win in the rainbow jersey.
Bueno, camisola para mim é muito importante, sem dúvida.
My jersey is very important to me. Sometimes it is complicated to manage the expectation. However, I want to enjoy my new jersey this year. It's a big responsibility representing this jersey, and I want to do my best in my own way to honour my jersey during 2014.
The terrain on the final stage from Martigny to Saas-Fez saw Rui Costa come into his own, but there were other stunning mountain passes that Graham had the pleasure of shooting on.
I think Switzerland's probably the most beautiful country in Europe, and luckily for me they have a race like the Tour de Suisse that goes around it for about 10 days in June. And June in Switzerland is a mixture of spring and summer, so you get both kinds of weather, but what you always get is these fantastic landscapes. The valleys, the mountains, the rivers, everything. They haven't got beaches in Switzerland, but they've got everything else. It's probably the most beautiful country to photograph a bike race in.
The opening days of the Tour de France would offer similarly fantastic opportunities for Graham to capture the big wide shot, as millions flocked to the roadside to see the race. The British riders were also expectant.
Tour de France is starting in the UK. It's something I couldn't have dreamed about as a kid, you know. To have 3 stages this year, it makes me buzz, it gives me goosebumps, especially the first stage, finishing my mother's hometown in Harrogate. I've never been so excited about one day of the year before in my life. So.
Cav's excitement was short-lived as he crashed out on the opening stage. But it didn't stop the British crowds coming out in their droves. In his 37 years following the Tour, Graham has never seen such unprecedented numbers.
It was overwhelming. That's one way of describing it. I was overwhelmed by the number of people there. I wasn't a cyclist, obviously, but even on a motorbike behind the peloton, you feel this mass of humanity, and it's kind of a little bit scary. And when we left for France next day, it was actually kind of like, whew, we've made it, you know. No accidents, no setbacks at all.
While Graham escaped Britain crash-free, many high-profile riders suffered the same fate that beset Mark Cavendish when the race hit France. Reigning champion Chris Froome abandoned after multiple crashes, while Alberto Contador exited on stage 10 after a high-speed accident. Events that both cyclists hinted at before the race.
The 10th stage will show for the first time the shape of each contender for the general classification. It could be very demanding.
It's always the uncertainty of what's going to happen, in the sense of who's going to puncture, who's going to crash right in front of you. All these kind of factors that you can't really control.
Chris Froome will be trying to etch the 9th of July from his memory, but the cobbled stage from Ypres to Arenberg proved happy ground for Astana's Vincenzo Nibali. The Italian made a surprise attack, as he hinted to us he would in a pre-race interview.
I always try to attack, to break away. To attack has always been my thing. It's good to wait, but it's not good to wait for too long. You have to wait for the right moment and surprise. It's the surprise that makes the difference, when you do something that people aren't expecting.
Strange to actually be taking a picture of Nibali in the closing stages of that long, horrible, wet, cobbled stage, and realising this is the yellow jersey of the Tour de France. He's a climber. He shouldn't be doing this in the middle of a cobbled stage in the first week of the Tour de France, but he was.
Nibali would go on to win the Tour de France in style. He dominated in the mountains, with his rivals unable to hang on to his wheel. With the Vuelta just beginning and the world's yet to start, there are still many things to look forward to. But as our series draws to an end, we bid farewell to those who are retiring from the sport.
Whenever you go on your bike, remember, ride it as if you stole it.
We celebrate our champions.
It's sport. It's a competition. It counts that you win.
And look forward to the future.
I'm just focusing on my work, about my progression, about I just want to feel that I can make it stronger.
Thanks for watching, and make sure to keep an eye on our digital platforms for updates in the off-season.